Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper analysis. Today we have taken important articles featured in the Hindu newspaper Delhi edition dated 12 January 2023. Topics for today's discussion are displayed on your screen. Let's begin the discussion.
Now today is Thursday and it is time for your weekly practice question for your mains examination. So the question has been taken from the DNS dated 10th January 2023 where Ankit sir discussed in detail about fighting corruption based on the article which appeared in the Hindu newspaper. So based on this, the question is, corruption is a cancer that steals away from the poor and erodes the public trust. Identify the causes and suggest the way forward to tackle the menace of corruption. Now this question carries 15 marks and needs to be written in 250 words. And the link for this particular question has been added in your YouTube description.
So our first discussion is based on this article which featured in the Hindu newspaper page number 6. Article is related to two recent reports released in January that have highlighted the prevalence of high child mortality in India. Now, according to Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, in 2019, infant mortality rate stands at 30 per 1,000 live birth. This article highlights the reason behind such high rate of infant mortality. Along with this, it also provides suggestions to improve this situation. From UPSC examination perspective, if you can refer to GS paper 2 syllabus, health is a subtopic mentioned under main topic of social justice. Now this article is important from prelims perspective also, as the reports mentioned in this article can be basis of preliminary questions. From the mains perspective, you can use data and arguments which have been provided in this article in your answer writing. So let's begin the discussion. Now, before moving on to the main article, let us discuss some key terms that have been used in this article. First is preterm birth. Now, preterm birth is defined as babies born alive before 37 weeks of pregnancy are completed. Now, there are subcategories, namely extreme, very, and moderate preterm, and it is based on gestational age. If this age is less than 28 weeks, it is called extreme preterm. If it lies between 28 to 32 weeks, it is called very preterm, and if it lies between 32 to 37 week, it is known as moderate preterm. Now, babies may be born preterm because of a spontaneous preterm labor or because there is a medical indication to plan an induction of labor or caesarean birth early. The next important term is stillbirth. Now, stillbirth is the death or loss of baby before or during delivery. Now, stillbirth is further classified as either early, late, or term. An early stillbirth is a fetal death occurring between 20 and 27 completed weeks of pregnancy. Late stillbirth occurs between 28 and 36 completed pregnancy week, while term stillbirth occurs between 37 or more completed pregnancy weeks. Next term is antepartum service. Now, antepartum care is referred as prenatal care. It consists of all-encompassing management of patients throughout their pregnancy course. Next term is intrapartum. The time period spanning childbirth, that is from the onset of labor through delivery of the placenta. Intrapartum can refer to both the women and the fetus. Another term used is neonatal care, which is connected with the babies who have just been born. Next term is perinatal mortality. Perinatal mortality refers to the death of fetus or neonat, that is newly born. Another important term which has been used in this article is kangaroo mother care. It is a method of care of preterm infants. The method involves infants being carried usually by the mother with skin-to-skin contact. Now, as we talked earlier, this article sheds light on the findings of two reports which have been published in January 2022. First report is the levels and trends in child mortality. It is published by the United Nations Interagency Group for Child Mortality Estimation, that is UNIGME. Now, what is UNIGME? It was formed in the year 2004 to share data on child mortality, improve methods for child mortality estimation, report on progress toward child survival goals, and enhance country's capacity to produce timely and properly assessed estimates of child mortality. UNIGME is led by the United Nations Children's Fund, that is UNICEF, and it also includes the World Health Organization, the World Bank Group, and the United Nations Population Division of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs as full member. Now, this report estimates that globally 5 million, that is 50 lakh children died before their 5th birthday, that is under 5 mortality in 2021. Over half of these, that is 2.7 million, occurred among children aged 1 to 59 months, while the remainder, that is 2.3 million, occurred in just the first month of life, that is neonatal death. Now, concerning part is India's share. India's share in these child mortalities was estimated at around 7 lakh under 5 deaths and around 6 lakh infant deaths and around 4.5 lakh neonatal death. Another report which has been mentioned in this article is titled as Never Forgotten. It is also published by UNIGME and it sheds light on stillbirth. Highlights of these reports will be discussed later. Another report mentioned in this article is Sample Registration System, which was released in September 2022. Now, the Sample Registration System is a large-scale demographic survey for providing reliable annual estimates of infant mortality rate, birth rate, death rate, and other fertility and mortality indicator at the national and at the subnational levels. It is published by the Office of the Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India, that is ORGI, under the Union Ministry of Home Affairs. It highlights that there is wider interstate variation in child mortality in India. For example, for every 1,000 live births, the infant mortality rate in Madhya Pradesh was 6-fold of the rate in Kerala. Secondly, it says that the children in rural parts in any age subgroup have much higher mortality rates than their urban counterparts. Now, according to author, there are twin challenges which are main reason behind the high infant mortality rate in India. The first is high level of preterm birth and second is equally high level of stillbirths prevalent in India. So the first challenge is of children being born too early. Now, this is a challenge because these preterm babies are 2 to 4 times at higher risk of death after birth in comparison to those born after 37 weeks of gestation. Globally, 1 in every 10 birth is preterm, while in India, 1 in every 6 to 7 birth is preterm. Now, studies have shown that preterm births contribute to 1 in every 6 under 5 child death. However, author says that 3 out of 4 deaths due to preterm birth related complications are preventable. Now, another challenge is the stillbirths. Now, according to the Never Forgotten report by UNIGME, globally an estimated 1.9 million stillbirths happened in 2021. In 2021, the absolute estimated number of stillbirths in India lies at around 3 lakh. And it was greater than the death among children in 1 to 59 month of age category, which was around 2.7 lakh. So there are more stillbirths in India than overall infant mortality before the age of 5 years. The rates and number of both preterm birth and stillbirth are unacceptably high and drive the neonatal, infant and child mortalities upwards in India. Thus, they demand urgent interventions. Now, if the numbers are so high and they demand urgent intervention, why there is lack of attention? Experts believe that the problem is the lack of timely granular data on stillbirth and preterm birth from the block, district, and state levels. Over the decades, while countries have strengthened the mechanism for tracking the child mortality, the data on stillbirths and preterm births are scarce. Even at global level, the first ever report on stillbirth was released only in October 2020. Now, in India, the SRS report on stillbirth is under cloud of doubts because the estimates of SRS reports are not in consonance with other estimates, and according to experts, the number shown by SRS report is way lower than the actual figure. So what are the solutions? According to author, the majority of stillbirths and preterm births can be prevented by scaling up known and proven interventions and improving the quality of health service. And he gives some suggestions to improve the same. First is increasing access to family planning services. Second is improving antepartum services such as health and nutrition, including the intake of iron folic acid by pregnant mothers. Another suggestion is providing counseling on the importance of healthy diet and optimal nutrition. Author says the identification and management of risk factor is of paramount importance. Author says that the measures to prevent, detect early and manage diseases which put mothers at high risk like diabetes, hypertension, obesity and infections should be taken. Now, ensuring the kangaroo mother care and early initiation of exclusive breastfeeding is another suggestion that should be taken up. Monitoring labor and functional referral linkages, that is, sending a patient to another physician for ongoing management of a specific problem. And improving the quality of healthcare services will prevent stillbirths. The interventions can be best delivered if data on preterm birth and stillbirths are better recorded as well as reported. The maternal and perinatal death surveillance guidelines need to be effectively implemented, and the International Classification of Diseases definition for perinatal mortality must be adopted. India needs to identify the hotspot clusters of stillbirths and preterm birth for local and targeted intervention. Now, on the policy side, author says that in the National Health Policy of 2017, the government had committed to investing 2.5% of the GDP on health by 2025. Now, 6 years since then, the government's allocation for health has increased only marginally. Even by the best estimate, it is around 1.5% of the GDP, which is one of the lowest in the world. Now, author says there are multiple reasons why India's health system needs more government funding, as children continue to die from preventable causes, pregnant women do not receive good quality care, aggregate mortality hides the inequities in health outcomes, and the brunt of those inequities is borne by the poorest and marginalized families. And the primary healthcare system is underfunded, and some cosmetic changes along are not be enough to improve health outcomes. An author says that it is time for the government to allocate more funds for health, starting with the upcoming budget. Inspiration for our next discussion comes from this news, which featured in the Hindu newspaper, page number 10. News talks about how Office of Registrar General of India is following obsolete criteria to define scheduled tribes. If you can refer to General Studies paper 2, under the topic of social justice, you will find mention of vulnerable section. And if the criteria to define scheduled tribe and other communities is flawed in itself, it is bound to affect the welfare schemes or any government intervention in an adverse manner. Apart from this article also talks about National Commission of Scheduled Tribe and Office of Registrar General of India. And as you can see, that appointment to various constitutional posts, powers, function and responsibilities of various constitutional bodies is also mentioned in the syllabus. Apart from this, statutory, regulatory and various quasi-judicial bodies have also find its mention under the governance part. So here in this article, we will discuss what is the present procedure to include a community into this list. Second, we will see what is the criteria that is being followed right now. Then we will see what government has done to improve upon this and what is the present status and suggestions regarding the same. So let's begin the discussion. Now if we will talk about the present procedure that is being followed to include a community into the list, following are the steps which are being followed by the Government of India. So whenever representations are received in the ministry, that is Tribal Affairs Ministry, for inclusion or exclusion of any community in the list of scheduled tribes of state UT, the ministry forwards the representation to the concerned state government or union territory administration for recommendation as required under Article 342 of the Constitution. If the concerned state government or UT recommend the proposal, then the same is sent to the Registrar General of India. Now, if the Registrar General of India is satisfied with the recommendation of the state government or UT, it recommends the proposal to the central government. Thereafter, the government refers the proposal to the National Commission for Scheduled Tribe, that is NCST, for their recommendation. If the NCST also recommends the case, the matter is processed for the decision of the cabinet. Thereafter, the matter is put before the parliament in the form of a bill to amend the presidential order. Now, one very important point is that cases for inclusion or exclusion with the state government or UT or the Registrar General of India or the NCST does not support are rejected. So, not at every step is a prerequisite to get included or excluded in the list of scheduled tribes of a state or union territory. So as you know, the news is about the obsolete criteria. So let us understand what is it. Now the existing criteria followed by the government for a specification of a community as a scheduled tribe is defined by Lokur Committee that gave its recommendation in 1965 and which are as follows. That community must reflect indication of primitive traits. It must have a distinctive culture. It must exhibit characteristic of geographical isolation, shyness of contact with the community at large, and backwardness. Now these recommendations of 1965 does not hold ground in present era of development. So in light of this concern, Government of India constituted a task force to provide new and objective criteria. So the Government Task Force on Scheduling of Tribes constituted under the leadership of the then Tribal Affairs Secretary Rishikesh Panda in February 2014. Now this task force noted that criteria may have become obsolete considering the process of transition and acculturation. It noted that terms like primitive and the requirement of primitivity to be a characteristic of scheduled tribes indicates a condescending attitude by the outsider, that is, a behavior of superiority. Task Force added that what we consider primitive is not considered by the tribals themselves. Task Force also noted that much of the mess created in the classification and identification of tribes is because of the classical orientation that followed a rigid and dogmatic approach. It also pointed out problem with the geographical isolation criteria, arguing that as infrastructure development continued across the country, how can any community remain in isolation? Accordingly, the task force recommended changes to the criteria in May 2014, and based on this, the Tribal Affairs Ministry in June 2014 prepared a draft cabinet note to overhaul the criteria and procedure for scheduling of new communities as STs. But as of in 2023, nothing much has been done beyond this point. So to understand in simpler terms why we need for changes in the existing criteria. Now over the period of time, especially after independence, the tribal communities have been undergoing the processes of transition and acculturation due to the impacts of planned change, modernization and globalization. Tribes do show some distinctness in their culture, but the regional variations cannot be ruled out due to acculturation influence of adjoining population. Most of the tribes got converted to mainstream religions like Hinduism and Christianity. Now, as we know, migration in India were frequent for political, economic, and ecological reasons. Even the most isolated groups were part of a wider network of economic relations. There are only a few tribes which are totally isolated, like that of Jarawa and Sentinelese in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now, the term primitive has been challenged as a value loaded term, indicating a condescending attitude, as referred by the task force also, by the outsiders. Besides, the so called primitivity is a stage in evolution of a community through which all communities have passed or passing. The tribal themselves resent to be called as primitive. If these outdated criteria are still going to be adopted, there may be hardly few communities to qualify for ST status. And many of the existing ST communities will lose their ST status. Hence, there emerge the need to revisit the existing criteria in order that apparent historical injustice can be addressed in a practical and contextual manner. A more flexible criteria should be adopted for this purpose, rather than following a rigid and dogmatic approach as pointed out by the task force also. Now, based on the recommendations of the task force headed by Rishikesh Panda, following criteria points are proposed for consideration by National Commission for ST. First is common community name for group identity. Second is distinct language dialect which may or may not exist today, as the community may be bilingual, speaking own language among themselves and local or regional language to communicate with others. Third is presence of core culture relating to life cycle, songs, dances, paintings, folklore. Another criteria that can be adopted is endogamy or marital relationship primarily within their own community and with other scheduled tribes. Next criteria is autonomous religious beliefs and practices, where the traditional magico-religious functionaries are from the community. Though practicing Hindu way of life would not be a bar. Next suggested criteria is to include such communities which have traditional institution of social control relatively intact. Communities which exhibit low level of techno-economy, that is simple, less diversified, simple exchange of goods and services and mutual interdependence. And the last criteria which should be adopted is relative socio-economic and educational backwardness. Our next discussion is based on this news which featured on page number 3 of the Hindu newspaper. As a women group in Assam has demanded to remove section 197 of Criminal Procedure Code, that is CrPC, and Armed Force Special Power Act, that is AFSPA, in Assam. Now, if you will look at the General Studies Paper 3 syllabus, the various security forces and agencies and their mandate has been clearly mentioned under the internal security part. Apart from this, if you will look into GS Paper 2 syllabus, functioning of judiciary and executive has also been mentioned. And UPSC of lately has been going into finer details of major static topics. As in 2021, UPSC has asked a question in preliminary examination about judicial custody. So try to attempt this question and let us know your answer in the comment box given below. Here in this discussion, we will look into why this women group is demanding the scrapping of these provisions. What is section 197 of CrPC? What is AFSPA and what are the powers which it gives to the armed force personnel? Apart from this, we will also look into the term cognizance, as the main focus of this news is regarding this term only. So let's begin the discussion. Now first let us understand what is the meaning of the term taking cognizance. In simpler word, it is to recognize legally. Cognizance in general means knowledge or notice, and taking cognizance of offense means taking notice or becoming aware of the alleged commission of an offense. Now, the court will have to take cognizance of the offense before it could proceed with the conduct of the trial. Taking cognizance does not involve any kind of formal action, but occurs as soon as magistrate applies his mind to the suspected commission of an offense for the purpose of legal proceedings and subsequent steps to be taken. For example, summoning an accused on the basis of the information available for inquiry or trial. Cognizance can be said to have been taken. So, taking cognizance is the application of judicial mind, the intention of starting a judicial proceeding with respect to an offense or taking steps to see whether there is a basis for starting the judicial proceeding by the court is taking cognizance. Now, any magistrate may take cognizance of any offense upon receiving a complaint of facts which constitute such offense, upon a police report of such facts, and upon information received from any person other than police officer or upon his own knowledge that such offense has been committed. Now, why has the women wing demanded to remove the section 197 of CrPC and AFSPA? Now, with reference to section 197 of CrPC, the Women in Governance Network, that is Wing India, has demanded to remove section 197 as it prohibits the court to take cognizance of an offense committed by a judge or magistrate or a public servant unless it is sanctioned by the central government. That is, prior permission of the central government is required to take a cognizance of the offense. According to wing members, requirement of central government sanction for prosecution under section 197 should be abolished, especially in cases of custodial violence, human rights violations. Now, for scrapping AFSPA, they argued that there are many examples of youth in Northeast India being killed in the name of counter-insurgency operations because of certain laws that give immunity to the armed force personnel. Now, Guwahati High Court in an order had directed the central government to compensate the families of two Eastern Assam youths who were killed by the security forces 6 years ago after being branded as extremists. Now, to summarize this, you can say that section 197 of CrPC stops the court from taking cognizance or taking a legal action against a public servant, against judges, or against armed forces personnel if there is any action done by them in discharge of their official duty. And similar protection has been provided by the section 3 of the AFSPA. Now let us look into details of the provisions of section 197 of CrPC. Now section 197 provides that if case is to be initiated against judges and public servants, then the court cannot take cognizance without the compliance to the formalities required under the provision. And what are the compliance? If any act has been done while acting in discharge of official duty or perpetrate discharge of such duty by a public servant who is not removable except with the sanction of the government, court cannot take the cognizance of an offense except the previous sanction of the central government or the state government. This protection has been extended to the members of the armed forces of the Union, and while acting or purporting to act in discharge of official duty, cognizance against them cannot be taken by the court except with the previous sanction of the central government. State governments have also been authorized to extend the protection to the members of the forces charged with maintenance of public order, and court cannot take cognizance against them except with the previous sanction of state government concerned. Now, this women organization is alleging that these protections are being used as a license to commit atrocities on youth and the population of Assam. Now, having seen the details related to section 197, let us look into the AFSPA. The AFSPA was first applied to the 7 sister states in northeast India, including Assam, Manipur, Tripura, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, and Nagaland on 1st September 1958 to stop the northeastern states seceding from the Indian Union. Later, Punjab and Chandigarh also came within the purview of this act, which was later withdrawn in 1997. AFSPA was then applied to the state of Jammu and Kashmir in 1990 and has been in force since then. So, what are the special powers of armed forces under AFSPA? AFSPA gives armed forces the power to maintain public order in disturbed areas, and a disturbed area is one which is declared by notification under section 3 of the AFSPA. If the governor of the state or the administrator of the union territory or the central government in either case is of the opinion that the whole or any part of such state or union territory is in such a disturbed or dangerous condition that the use of armed forces in aid of civil power is necessary, then the state government or the central government can declare whole area or a part of the state or UT to be disturbed area in the official gazette. Now, any commissioned officer, warrant officer, non-commissioned officer, or any other person of equivalent rank in the armed forces may, in a disturbed area, for the maintenance of public order after giving such due warning as he may consider necessary. So, it is the discretion of these service personnel, because of the term as he may consider necessary, fire upon or otherwise use force even to the causing of death against any person who is acting in contravention of any law or order. It empowers them to prohibit assembly of 5 or more persons or the carrying of weapon or the things capable of being used as weapons or firearms, ammunition or explosive substances in the disturbed area. They can destroy any arms dome, prepared or fortified position or shelter or any structure used as a training camp for armed volunteers or utilized as a hideout by the armed gangs or absconders wanted for any offense. They can also enter and search any premises without warrant and make any arrest or recover any person who are believed to be wrongfully restrained. No prosecution, suit, or other legal proceeding shall be instituted except with the previous sanction of the central government against any person in respect of anything done or purported to be done in exercise of the powers conferred under the Act. Now, proponents who are demanding scrapping of AFSPA argue that these unchecked powers are the main cause of atrocities against the civilians, and the armed force personnel go scot-free, and they have been demanding for scrapping of such provisions. Our next discussion is based on this news which featured on page number 5 of the Hindu newspaper. News tells that the Godavari estuary in Andhra Pradesh has become a prime and safe habitat for the Indian skimmer. Scientific name Rhynchops albicollis. And this statement has been given by director of the Bombay Natural History Society, that is BNHS. Now, this news is important from the preliminary examination perspective as general issues on environmental ecology, biodiversity and climate change has been mentioned. So here in this discussion, we will be looking into points which are important from the prelims examination perspective. Now, IUCN status of this bird is endangered. It is more widespread in winter. The Indian skimmer is found in the coastal estuaries of western and eastern India. It occurs primarily on larger sandy lowland rivers around lakes and adjacent marshes and in the non-breeding season in estuaries and coasts. The Indian skimmer grows to a length of around 40 to 43 centimeter. It breeds colonially on large exposed sandbars and islands. It feeds on surface dwelling fish, small crustaceans and insect larvae. Major threats include habitat degradation, which is exploitation and degradation of rivers and lakes through fishing, transportation, domestic use, irrigation schemes, and pollution from agricultural and industrial chemicals are largely responsible for their habitat degradation. Another threat is excessive and widespread increase in disturbance. The damming of the Chambal River in upstream Rajasthan has adversely affected its population at National Chambal Sanctuary, Uttar Pradesh, due to the dropping water levels allowing predators and livestock access to breeding islands. Now, predation by corvids like house crows, presence of stray and domestic dogs have been known to decimate breeding colonies. Our last discussion of today is based on this news which featured on page number 5 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, the Kerala Tourism Department is likely to highlight Beypore, that is Uru, the wooden doors handcrafted by artisans and carpenters, and the water sports there in the detailed project report to be submitted to the Center for Swadesh Darshan project. Now, UPSC has been asking questions based on important current events related to art and culture of India. So, here in this discussion, we will be looking into the details related to Beypore boat. Now, why Beypore Uru is important? Recently, the District Tourism Promotion Council of Kozhikode has applied for geographical indication tag for the famous Beypore Uru boat. Now, key highlights of Beypore Uru are enlisted here. As you have seen in the picture, it is a wooden dhoot, that is ship, sailing boat or sailing vessel handcrafted by skilled artisans and carpenters in Beypore, Kerala. Beypore Urus are symbol of Kerala's trade relations and friendship with the Gulf countries. The Beypore Urus are purely made of premium wood without using any modern technique. The wood used to build the Uru is still sawed the traditional way, which requires immense expertise. It takes anywhere between 1 to 4 years to build each Uru, and the entire process is done manually. Records show that there are several communities traditionally associated with Uru making. The prominent people among them are Odais. They manage the technical matters of shipbuilding. The Khalasis are another prominent class associated with Uru making after the Odais. They are also referred to as Mappila Khalasis, as majority of them are Mappila Muslims. They are world famous for their skill and expertise in launching the completed Urus into the water by using only traditional methods. So that's all for today's discussion. Stay tuned for more such updates.